Hey everybody, how's it going? Thanks for joining me this evening. Doing one of the news streams tonight, just catching up on things. I saw some people already talking about rank punditry in the chat, and that's exactly what you'll be getting today. So I hope you're prepared. I'm joined today on the stream by Last Things. Last Things, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, and I think people on my channel have probably seen Last Things a few times by now. But if for some reason you haven't subscribed to Last Things, make sure that you are checking out his channel. I've got the links down there below. But that said, let's go ahead and jump directly into the rank punditry. So I think everybody has probably noticed that all of a sudden the lab leak hypothesis for COVID is no longer like foreboding. It's all of a sudden it's starting to pop up all over the media. You're starting to see Dr. Fauci and a number of other officials start to, hedge their language against, something that they had called a crazy conspiracy theory not too long ago. You're starting to see, major media outlets talking about how we might have to take a second look at this kind of thing. And so I think the really interesting switch, though, has been the shift in social media censorship. So let me share this real quick. But yeah, I think it's been really interesting that we've had major players like Facebook and other tech companies start to say, okay, you are actually allowed to talk about this now. You won't immediately get banned. You won't immediately get your post removed. You won't immediately get a strike against your channel. And so it's interesting. Last Things, what do you make about the shift kind of in the narrative and how they're now approaching the lab leak versus, someone ate bat soup somewhere in China?
Yeah, I guess the first major question kind of becomes: is Facebook changing their position on something like that because it's too late for anybody to do anything about it, or for it to really matter or affect mainstream politics? I think kind of an analogous event would be like, George Floyd and the fentanyl content in his bloodstream. I don't think that a lot of mainstream media sources reported on that until well after, things were where they were. So I guess, theory A would be that it's just Facebook is loosening its grip on something like this because nobody can really do any harm with regards to it. Or theory B would be that it's somehow in Facebook's interest to at least rubber stamp the theory. I don't know if you think of it any other reason, Auron, or one of those speaks to your gut more.
Well, I think it's interesting that we're seeing a lot of this now. I mean, I guess it's always existed, but we're seeing a lot of this front load the story with something that needs to be true in the moment, and then retroactively, work backwards when it's no longer necessary to force that story and kind of pretend like you've always had this open-minded approach. So, for instance, I think we saw this with Ashley Babbitt and the police officer in January 6th, right? Like, the officer was murdered, and then, maybe it was a result of contact. And then later on, you quietly saw stories drip out about, actually, it looks like there was some kind of medical issue, and it wasn't maybe related to the actual events of January 6th. Like you said, same thing with George Floyd up front, obviously, like, horrendous murder, there's no excuse for this. And then slowly anybody who's saying, talking about the drug overdose or how that could have affected it was just dismissing the police brutality and supported the murder of black men by police officers. And then slowly, the medical stuff dripped in, but by then the damage is already done. And so I think the main purpose of the lab leak being suppressed was that it was an easy out for Trump, right?
Right.
It was too easy. It gave him an enemy. It gave him a foreign enemy, one which he had warned the public against many times and expressed, significant worries about. It would have allowed him to make it a battle against somebody who he'd already risen the profile of, and it was already had a lot of rhetoric against. Instead, if it's an accident, if there's no foreign government to blame, then you get to write a million stories about how Trump failed on procedure. And that's what they wanted.
Right. But I guess why not stick to that narrative now? Or I guess isn't it just easier to kind of remain going in that vector?
My guess would be that it's always, Moldbug says it's always in the marketplace of ideas. The truth is always the best seller, even if it's not the most advantageous one. So like, if you can have a piece of the truth, that is always going to have some level of advantage. It doesn't mean it always wins. There might be another competitor you need to pick, or something that wins out for other reasons. But if you can have the truth, then it's useful. And so if you're in a position, and I think they feel like they are in this position, where you can control pretty much all narratives and crush all opposing narratives, then you can really exploit it and then kind of go back and, like we said, like quietly fill those things in. This one I think is a little louder than some of the other ones, like George Floyd or the case with the officer on January 6th. But I do think we're seeing this continuous pattern of push the politically exploited narrative out front, crush any dissent, drive it off social media, and then as quietly as possible backfill the truth in. So if anybody really comes in and says, oh, well, this was all lie, you can be like, well, no, we found out more came to light, you'll be adjusted as it went, but the purpose had already been served.
Right. Yeah. And I'm thinking back, one of the earliest bands that I guess one of the big bands that I took note of was Stefan Molyneux. I don't know if you ever followed Freedom.
Yeah.
But I'm curious if he has a theory as to why exactly he got banned, because he did a big deep dive on Floyd right around the time he got banned. And he was, I think, one of the early voices that was saying, this COVID-19 seems to have popped up right next to the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Because, there are a lot of libertarian figures like that kind of call things like they see it very early. But, and he certainly had a reputation for that kind of stuff, but he had enough pieces come out kind of neck and neck with one another around the time that he got booted off of YouTube. I'm not sure what was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I haven't, unfortunately, kept up with him enough to hear if he has a theory as to, or maybe it was just an accumulated list of him scratching these subjects.
Yeah, I think that's really it. I think Molyneux, rather than navigating the minefield, sprinted down it at full speed at all times and basically hit every single one. And so he really ran into a lot of these. I mean, it also made him look ahead of the curve on a lot of stuff. But it meant he was constantly drawing fire on one thing or another. And I think, once you started the Alex Jones bans, it was always gonna roll downhill, and he was just kind of the next guy. You can always see this with YouTube, they're waiting for kind of the next guy to get big and take them down, and then the next one is once they could get the first couple, they had that momentum rolling, they felt like they could justify, I think, more and more, and once they saw they could get away with nailing the higher profile guys, and it's just working its way down, I think a lot of the times with guys like Molyneux.
Yeah, I agree. I guess hopefully our heads are really, really far down on the chopping block.
Yeah. Well, and that's why I think a lot of times we get, especially people in the NRX sphere, we get a lot of like, why don't you talk about this? Why don't you talk about that? Why aren't you shouting on every one of these things in the rooftops? And it's like, well, everybody who does that doesn't have a platform anymore,
Yeah.
or is in a platform where only people who agree with them can hear it. And that's, don't get me wrong, like some people need to make that content, and I totally understand like preaching to the choir is a valuable thing. I don't knock anybody who's been put in that situation. But it is always fun to me when people are like, why don't you just scream this thing that's got everybody else who screamed it banned? I'm like, well, I feel like you answered your own question.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Got a couple super chats here we can hit real quick from BHW. Greetings from Montreal, soon to be deep in the hills of New Brunswick with new wife. Congratulations very much, sir. Well done. What's a better investment, dairy cow or satellite internet? Oh, that's a good one.
Wow. The doomsteader in me says dairy cow.
Yeah, I think my default is actually dairy cow. Like, don't get me wrong, being connected is important, but for the good of your family, I feel like you take care of them first before you get connected. So I would go to dairy cow. But thank you very much for the donation. And then we've got all right. Last things, make more content, dude. Your insights into NRX, faith, and technocracy are awesome.
Thank you very much. All right. I appreciate it, and I should say I'm very self-conscious about how plotting I am with my content, and what I'm doing this time is I'm going to break up my next sort of piece into different parts. I'll probably have like part 1, part 2, part 3. Really hoping that part 1 comes out tomorrow. The only excuse I can give is I can just I can second everything that Dave the Distributist has to say about balancing this content with having a young family is brutal. It's usually about 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night by the time I can kind of sit down and get writing or editing. And Auron, I'm sure you can back me up. That's just not the time of day when your mind is the most agile.
Yeah,
I am grinding it out, I promise.
Yeah, the content grind is really difficult when you have family and work. We just got a house, and so I've been like repairing everything. Like we had like a water pipe bust, and you get stuff with the roof, and yeah, so you get home from work, you fix that stuff, and it's like, okay, yeah, now I'm gonna do a couple hours of intense thinking and writing. But yeah, no, I think we're all excited, and I'm glad to hear that you'll have a new one coming out tomorrow for that.
MacIntyre, if you just got a house, are you going to get a dairy cow or a satellite dish?
It's a good question. Well, I mean, I think, I don't know that we have the acreage for the cow, sadly. Yeah. Maybe something smaller, but the cow would be a bit of a stretch. I have not gone full, move out to Idaho and secure 9 acres, So
yeah.
Do not quite have compound.
I haven't talked my wife into the doomstead yet, but
soon, But, all right, so the next one I want to talk about here, I don't know if you saw this one, but the Amazon mental health booth here.
No, I don't know if I have read anything about that.
Okay. Well, then let me be the first to share this bit of dystopia with you.
Okay.
All right. So Amazon has created a Zen meditation mental health booth that they're putting in all of their warehouses because, their warehouses are notoriously terrible places to work, and workers often self-harm or harm others. And so they now have this booth pictured here, which is like a small, cubicle, but in a telephone booth.
Yeah.
And it's got like pictures of the sky inside and plants. And but my favorite part is that like the meditation comes by sitting down in front of a desktop computer and reading like articles about how to manage stress.
Wow. Wow. That's like a Black Mirror episode. That's the Onion article kind of writes itself in that.
Yeah. Well, that's when I saw it, I thought it was a Babylon Bee article. I'm like, oh, they got him again. What a great Oh no, this is real.
That's sort of the first world bourgeois version of the suicide nets on Chinese factories. Like not quite that grim dark and depressing, but it's still up there.
Yeah, this is what I first thought of here. The Futurama suicide boost. I don't know if you ever watched Futurama.
Yes.
But
yes. Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah.
On every quarter, you can just drop a quarter in and end your life. It's like, wow, it's amazing.
Yeah. Wow. When did that did that leak recently? Or,
yeah, they were rolling it out, like it was being announced. So I guess it's on its way, or it's been installed in some locations. But yeah, this comes right after Bezos just bought like a yacht with a yacht attached to it. So,
oh man.
Yeah, if anyone asks you, what does neoliberalism mean? I think
yeah. There's got to be memes already about the yacht attached to the yacht. I would have to imagine.
Yeah, no, I thought it was amazing that someone seriously thought that this was an improvement. Like someone actually really thought that like no one was self-aware enough to be like, isn't this like horribly dystopian? Or no one was willing to mention it, I guess.
Yeah. And I'm curious if anyone's really truly just ever allowed to take a break and go in it, or if you have to, use your allotted break time or what.
Oh yeah, no, I imagine like it's between that or the bathroom. Like, sorry, you can look at pictures of the sky plastered inside a phone booth, or you can go pee. One of the two.
Can people scream in there? Is it soundproof?
Yeah, you would hope. Like, I don't. I don't know. Like every aspect of it is just amazing to me. That they like it's just like picture like random like wallpaper of the sky glued on the side with with random plants all through it. Like if you were to find the most cynical HR solution to this problem and you were to parody it, it would be exactly a real thing that exists in Amazon now.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like the stage to the Truman Show or something like that.
Yeah. No, I wonder, because the other thing that I think is pretty horrific with Amazon is you're starting to see them open a number of retail locations, like salons, like like haircutting places and grocery stores and everything. Like this place that basically made it impossible for anything to function in retail is now going in and buying up all the remaining retail and putting real stores in them again.
Yeah, I know they had the ambition to roll out healthcare as well. I haven't been keeping up with that, but that was something on the Amazon radar a while ago.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing. Like your nurses have to go into the mental health booth like in between shifts.
Yeah.
Sorry, we need to break up your 18-hour shift. You can step into the mental health booth for 5 minutes and watch a video on thinking pure thoughts about the corporation. Yeah.
Yes. Oh my God. Yeah. No, and one day we'll all be on the Amazon health insurance. We can pay for our therapy sessions for it having, like destroyed whatever business we once worked at.
Yes. Now that everything you ever hoped for was destroyed, and you're working in our terrible wage slavery for the smallest possible amount, let's work through your psychological problems.
Yeah.
What about your 14-hour shifts where you never have the chance to have a family or own anything? Do you think most contributes to your depression?
Yeah. Oh man. Is the next thing you have less depressing?
I hate to break it to you, it's not that kind of stream, man. Okay. This is not the white pill stream. You came to the wrong place. Though I did put one on my Twitter today. I don't have it up here, but just so we can break this up, the atheist page in I think it's Kenya had to like their leader basically step down because he converted to Christianity. So like they were like posting on their on the official like Atheists of Kenya page about how the leader of their organization had renounced everything and turned to Christianity. So we can at least sneak a white pill in here somewhere.
Okay.
That's the one I had for today.
Great.
But let's see. Our next one is the resurrection of the collapse of the housing market. So go here. This one is Maxine Waters and her pushing for $25,000 first-time house buyer financial assistance, of course, with preference towards people of color and minorities and those of all those statuses. But the amazing thing is, I'm sure you're somewhat familiar with the lead up to the 2008 collapse.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep.
And so one of these was the home buying assistance, especially to minority homeowners who did not have the financial ability. So it seems like our plan to fight hyperinflation is to hyperinflate and then collapse the housing market.
First as tragedy, then as farce.
Right.
That's the term, right? Wow.
Very much so.
Yeah. I don't know if my area of the country, housing has been crazy because it's part of. I'm sure you've read about everybody kind of fleeing the cities because they have remote work as an option now. So that I'm in an area of the country that is sort of where a lot of people graduate to after they leave the cities. So the housing market in my neck of the woods has just been crazy. And they've been picked up like mad. They're going for pretty insane prices. And yeah, a $20,000, $25,000 down payment would not really do anything but, probably bankrupt people eventually.
Well, it's going to spike the home prices. It'll make sure that it puts anybody who doesn't have that assistance completely out of reach of the home market. And then eventually you imagine, I don't know, it's one of those things where, the last couple of years we were waiting to buy a house and we were thinking, the prices are going to fall. They have to fall. They're out of control. Everything's crazy. And then when COVID hit, they slowed down for a second because, everyone was scared, and then they skyrocketed, which is exactly the opposite of what you'd expect.
Yeah. But I think the people buying them up are like, upper middle class, white collar techies who don't have to live in San Francisco anymore, or New York or Chicago or Boston, or, pick your metropolis.
Yeah, down here in the South, we're definitely getting the flood of evacuees from the Northeast. You can literally just see people coming from New Jersey or New York showing up and offering 20, 30,000 over asking price in cash.
Yeah.
So it's impossible for locals to buy a home at anything approaching a reasonable cost.
Yeah.
But the amazing thing, of course, is that, and this is something like, I know they're not going to do this, but any government who is in any way approaching having a serious policy about housing or the well-being of the next generation in the country would be stopping this. It's all these private equity groups, all these hedge funds buying up chunks of housing and then just renting it out in mass.
Yeah.
Like that, I don't know about you, but in my area, that's what it is half of the available single family stock is being bought up and then just mass rented out by these huge conglomerates. So they're the ones coming in because they can offer cash. Like they're just coming in and destroying everybody's ability to make any kind of offers. And then they just rent it back to everybody who otherwise wouldn't have been able to buy a house at $600 or $700 over the total cost of the mortgage and everything.
Yeah, I don't know if that stuff's happening here. There's a lot of like second homes around here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the Northeast. There's a lot of kind of New York City elites that have their secondary houses here for the weekends and things like that. But housing for working people is brutal, really brutal where I am. But that's why they call it rent seeking,
Well, and I think it's also, one of of course, the issues that Politico raises in that article is the pushback that they might receive due to the fact that yet again this assistance is, very much targeted racially, and we already saw the same thing that happened with the farming assistance. You had one farmer, suing because he was like a disabled farmer, and as a white guy, he couldn't get the loan. I hope more people do that kind of thing. I think lawfare is the most effective of really the pushbacks that people have, but I still don't know that it's going to make a significant difference. But I think it is far more valuable, honestly, than like voting blocks at this point.
Sure. Yeah. I'd agree. I'd agree with that. Well, this one wasn't quite as blackpilling as the Amazon booth.
No, that one's pretty dystopian. This one is bad, but it's not. It's bad,
not but it's still it sort of makes me feel nostalgic for 2008. So
yeah, I've seen this one before at least.
Yeah,
exactly. Well, speaking of seeing this one before, let's check out our next one. All right, so this one is Blue's Clues is gearing up for Pride Month. And had a rather horrific LGBTQ themed sing along featuring a real life drag queen. I wish I had further pictures in there, because further in you can see like pictures of someone who looks like Moloch in the video. Like, I wish I was joking. Like, I thought people were like blowing that out of proportion for like, oh, okay, that's funny too, guys. I get it, but like, no, it really does look like that. But this one's pretty insane. This one had we're obviously seeing a full court press on this. It was funny. I was talking to some guys on a kind of a left wing podcast, the Fed Post. And they're like, where do you think this stuff is going? Like, where do you think it's going, guys?
Yeah.
Like, it didn't take them long to draw that connection. It's like, what's the only taboo left? What's the only thing that the progressives don't want you aren't willing to say you can do sexually?
Well, and I mean I guess it's kind of related to this. That there was that piece that came out a while ago about the I think it was the president of Drag Queen Story Hour, or the founder, some executive associated with Drag Queen Story Hour was arrested for on charges of child pornography.
Yes, yeah. Surprise to the great shock of everyone.
Yeah, I actually, Auron, we've talked on other streams about my stupid sort of early initiate days of attempting to red pill my normie friends. I live in a hyper progressive area, and I got sucked back in by the tractor beam when that article came out, and I thought if there's ever a red pill moment for my sort of progressive normie friends, it's this moment. And so I sent the piece to people that friends of mine that I've known for years that are whose children are in the same preschool as mine. And I thought if anything's going to get the job done, it is going to be this piece. And it's honestly, it's a miracle. I to this day, I'm shocked that there was never a drag queen story hour at my children's school, but they just did not hesitate to jump down my throat at like having the audacity and the transphobia to push this article. It did not. I guess I still haven't learned my lesson, but
when you see this kind of stuff, you just expect, like, surely you've hit the edge, right? Like, this has to be like the disgust limit for a human, right? Yeah. Like they're preaching this to your 5-year-old, right? It's not, you can't even give it the like, they're like 17, they can make their own choices. Like we're talking to 3, 4, 5-year-olds. But it, like you said, it's gotten so deep down that doesn't need the only reaction possible is the one that you got, which is the pushback against the phobias.
It jumped immediately into moralizing, and I had to quickly backpedal my way out of the conversation. But I think that was it. That's finally taught me to stay in my coffin, avoid the sunlight, don't like
you gotta hide that power level. You gotta know when to use it and when to no.
I was I had a great when we did our first stream. I realized that the best analogy for my life after I kind of got red pilled to a lot of this stuff and red mold bug. It was like I got turned into a vampire, but nobody had taught me how to live. So I kept like biting, like just biting people and like catching fire in the sunlight. And, I didn't understand why crucifixes and garlics like hurt to the touch. And like, eventually I met like a couple other vampires and they're like, dude, you need a sarcophagus. You're a night owl now. Cool it. But the first 3 or 4 months were just me not getting it.
I like that analogy, like the vampire who just got bit randomly and had no tutelage and you're just running around like I've seen the truth and no.
But still every once in a while I'm just like, I have to spike this. I'm in the end zone, right? I'm gonna spike it.
Surely like this person's right there. Like how can we not all see this?
And then the referee blows the whistle and throws the flag and I'm in trouble.
Well, and that's the thing it's so, this is kind of what the main thrust of where I was going to go with this talk today is the slippery slope, right? Everybody around this issue, all of the stuff targeted towards religious conservatives in the 90s and 80s, how could you, don't be ridiculous, none of this is going to happen. I mean, if I came to you and told you in, 1997, that 15 years after gay marriage they would be trying to explain drag to 4-year-olds and you would have assumed I'm a member of the Westboro Baptist Church, right?
Like what were they wrong about? What were they wrong about?
It's amazing. It's just if anything the religious right was far too underestimating of what would come next.
It's true. It's true. I think about that a lot. If people do, accuse me of being kind of a neocon or, some sort of 90s era right winger, I forget what the context. There's one famous line of like G.K. Chesterton where somebody was accusing him of something and he said like, but what exactly did you think they were wrong about when they when you're yelling at them? And that's true.
Yeah, because you see now, and there's a serious discussion. It's been all over Twitter, hell site that it is. It's been all over Twitter of just a pile of leftists now saying, look, it's Pride Month. Kink is part of Pride, and you have to teach children to accept LGBT lifestyles, and so you have to expose children to kink. It's the only, which again is just like that. It's literally like exactly what every single conservative said. Like this will come next. They will not just be taught tolerance. They will be taught acceptance, and then they will be taught adoption, and then it will go younger and younger until it breaks down all barriers. And that's literally like what we're watching happen, where like in theory, people who are described as serious are being like, you just have to expose 4-year-olds to men stripped down to their underwear behaving like dogs in the middle of the street. That's educating them.
Dark time.
And it's what happens when the tolerance is the religious watchword. It's anything is justifiable in its name. There's no sin in the name of tolerance. Everything is justifiable. So everything is secondary. Innocence of children is it's not a thing as long as because as long as they're being exposed to the right values in this case or what's being outlined as values, then there's no limiting principle.
Yeah, no, that's I couldn't put it better than that. That's absolutely true.
Do you think, I mean, I know obviously you've now, like you said, you had this discussion with people in your circles, but do you think that we're going to see, because I still see, the David, it's weird because, are you familiar with Shoe on Head at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, Shoe on Head's she used to be like a anti-feminism YouTuber, and then she went full Bernie Sanders and
Right.
kind of flipped over, and then but this week she's been trying to draw her line at like, no, I will not accept this. This is my line. I don't care if anybody calls me reactionary. Like, this is not okay. And it's like, I don't think you will draw this line. I don't think that I don't think you're going to die on this hill. Like, I think you're going to fold.
That's interesting. I mean, I hadn't, I did remember her from back in the kind of, like early Sargon era. She was part of that crew, but it'll be interesting to see if she folds. I think, I mean, what I say to every leftist that is attempting to sort of, disaggregate themselves from woke leftism is just simply good luck. Like, I don't think I'm friends with a lot of kind of old school labor lefties. And I just think that it's a lost cause. They think that they can kind of draw a line between kind of that old labor left and the new kind of woke agenda. And I just don't think it's going to. I don't think they're going to be able to do it as individuals. I don't think it's going to happen collectively.
No, I agree 100%. This is why I've been talking to so many of them. I'm talking to these guys on the Fed Post. I'm talking to Amy Therese. I'm talking to Tink Zorks. Like, I'm talking to a lot of these guys who are kind of with the people you're talking about, where they're labor lefties or straight up Marxists, but they're like, I'm not on board with the degeneracy. Like, this is not what I signed up for. I signed up for the proletariat or whatever, and not hawking this stuff to 4-year-olds. But I think that they're all just. It has, and I don't mean to insult them with this, but it has an intellectual dark web vibe to it, right? Like,
yeah. Like, it's just already kind of post hoc, like, they've already kind of been framed by their enemies, and it's it's just gets kind of cringe, I guess, is how I'd put it. One thing I am I know that you've talked about this book, and I'm a big fan of the book too. Why Liberalism Failed by Patrick Deneen. And one thing I'm looking forward to is I did hear him, I think it was on Alex Kashuta's podcast. I know you've had her on your channel. He's talking about his next book, which is called After Liberalism. And I think he spends a lot of time, I guess, postulating what some of the new political lines that are going to be drawn in the next decade are going to look like. And I he didn't forecast too much about the book, but I think he was saying that, New Labor is going to be a lot of white working class people with a lot of minorities, Black and Latino people who are religious and have families, and that's going to kind of create a new bulwark and something that might be substantial enough. But you're going to have like white working class people that were traditionally Republican teaming up with a lot of other working class people. He seems to feel a little bullish that there might be a bit of a resurgence of labor identity coming up in the next few years, which would be music to my ears. But yeah, when I hear people like Amy Therese talk, and I think she's great. She does great stuff. I'm kind of scratching my head and saying to myself, why are you still left?
Yeah. Where does this go for you? Yeah. No, I think I like Deneen's book. Like you said, I've talked about it. I think it's probably the best like normie case against liberalism. Like, if you wanted a book to hand to your mom who goes to church.
100%. Yeah.
I think it's an excellent, and I think it says some brave things in there. Like, I think it's not just a super safe book. It does say some surprisingly reactionary things for a book of that, popularity, that's got a blurb from Barack Obama on the front. Yeah. But at the same time, like, he and Vermeule, I don't know if you're familiar with Adrian Vermeule.
Not as much, but
yeah, he's one of these. Yeah, he's a college law professor, kind of in that Catholic sphere, and there's a couple of these guys. The guy from the New York Post, whose name I can never remember properly. but there's a number of guys in the sphere who have said what you're saying there, and what Deneen is saying, and I really want it to be true. That would be ideal for me. Like you're saying, that if I was to say, how do we build a coalition, that could actually politically challenge this, I think that would be, what I would hope, but I just don't see it happening. Like I think that I think unfortunately the racial tribalism narrative is just more powerful. And I think it's going to win the day for a lot of those groups. You did see Hispanics shift. I will say this: you did see some Hispanics, not a full tidal wave, but in the Trump election, you did see what is a notable demographic shift in some of their voting. So I'm not saying that none of that'll go on, but I think there's a structural problem in the way that civil rights legislation works that keeps these groups aligning with white working class voters, because basically white working class doesn't have access to civil rights legislation, so they don't have access to the secondary constitution. And
I think it's also just hard to like imagine just like where is the leadership that would make something like that happen. I mean, this would have to be, I guess, either like a reformed kind of recreated Republican Party that's somehow more, labor driven, or it would have to be a new party altogether. I certainly don't think that, the Democrats are going to take on anything resembling that. And I can't conceptualize of any current Republican senator who has the vision that Deneen is alluding to within the party.
Well, and I mean, I'm notoriously black-pilled on democracy anyway. So I inherently have zero faith in that possibility, just on the face. But yeah, no, I agree that if that solution was to work, they definitely do not have the kind of leadership available to the Republican Party right now to make that kind of realignment happen in the short to medium term, I think.
Yeah, agreed. This might be a good segue. We're going to talk about Jenner. This might be a good segue.
That was going to be my next one here, so we'll grab that. Good call. All right, so next story. This one's a couple weeks old now, really, and this is actually something I was gonna do a video on it, and I wrote a video on it, and I just didn't like it. Because I wanted to bounce it off somebody. So I was saving it. It's one of the reasons I was like, hey, man, can you come out and do one of these? Because I was like, I want to work through this with somebody. So Jenner obviously announced a bid for the California governor office, against Newsom, and immediately got a large amount of support from Republicans. Was on, Sean Hannity. Was instantly being pushed by guys like Jack Posobiec, who are supposed to be like part of this new right, but immediately jumped on board of this train with Jenner. Was making the rounds on all these different appearances, and you just immediately saw exactly what you could predict from the Republican Party, which was, obviously because Jenner had come out as a Republican. There were immediately a bunch of news sites talking about the betrayal to the trans community and what this meant, and the destruction of an icon that's now, turned, its back on the people it was supposed to serve, blah, blah, blah. And you immediately saw Republicans going like, oh, look who's, look who's the party of trans rights now, like, look at you guys, you're the real bigots, and it's like, oh man, have we learned nothing? Have we learned nothing at all? Yeah. And the answer was clearly no.
Yeah. That's that's basically my sense of things as well. I always wonder if there's anybody within the Republican Party that's just crunching any data or running any stats when support like that comes through for Jenner. Like, is there anybody that's, I guess, running the algorithm or the game theoretic probability of within the Republican Party who's saying, okay, we do need to, get behind somebody like Jenner, because I've tried slicing the pie, and this is the only way that we stand a chance for winning elections, or if it's something that's just more intuitive than that, or
I think it really is that they see what works, and the only thing that has ever worked in the last 70 years at least has been civil rights arguments. Like they trump all other arguments, and the Republicans are constantly looking to outflank. They've been losing nonstop on this for 70 plus years, and they keep looking for that moment that they're just gonna like get on the right side of one of these civil rights issues and then nail down the easy wins that the left has been securing ad infinitum, and it's just never going to happen, because you can't out Democrat the Democrats, even if it was even if you were fine with cynically betraying all of your principles. And like you said, we're just looking at the game theoretic elements. Like it is the marquee example of Cthulhu Swims left, right?
It is. Yeah, and it just makes me think of like Napoleon invading Russia, just again and again.
Yeah, it's truly amazing, because Jenner comes out immediately saying like trans girls shouldn't compete in women's sports. This is what makes it okay to push this candidate, right? That was the entry point, and that's what got so many people on board. It's like, look, we've got our own transgender person saying that transgender shouldn't do this. This was supposed to be the killer stroke, and this is always how it works. We've got our Thomas Sowell making the arguments, and so this is going to win over the Black community. We've got our Caitlyn Jenner. This is going to win over the trans community or whatever. And so you always see them set up this idea that this is going to be an entry point, and then 2 interviews in, Jenner's already pushing. We need amnesty for illegal aliens. And then just a couple days ago, Jenner said, well, I mean, if a trans girl started her transition very young, then of course that they should still be able to compete. I was only talking about recent transitions,
Yeah.
And so even that position lasted all of 2 weeks.
I was going to say, I mean, I'd like Cthulhu swims to the left in terms of the Republican Party stance, and then I was gonna comment that I'm guessing if Jenner got elected, she would just be governing from the left. It sounds like completely Democratic positions. So yeah, I mean, I guess they just want a Democratic candidate for the Republican Party.
Yeah, like I said, they just want wins, and they see this is what wins, and so there must be some way we can compromise this and fold it in. And I think I think a lot of this is the function of the Republican Party. This is what the Republican Party actually does. Is it actually just handmade these issues? It just slows them down enough for the right to assimilate them and deliver it to the left-wing position. The what do conservatives do? Whatever the left was doing 30 years ago.
Yeah,
that is conservatism now.
Yeah, is the main thrust and premise of the video you've got cooking, Auron, the sort of that this is just a prime example of Cthulhu swimming leftward?
Yeah, I think that's why I killed it, because I felt it was saying a lot of what I'd already said, and it felt like something was better. Like I said, rank punditry. It felt like it was it belonged in more in this format than a full video, because it wasn't saying. Sometimes I like to break down things. I've done that with like COVID, and I've done that with the Title IX Obama thing, where it's like, okay, let's watch the cathedral work. Like, let's break down what are the mechanisms used, what's the process. Like, we know about the theory, but let's apply it and actually see how it travels through the political system. Yeah. And so I was thinking of trying to do that with this one, but it felt too obvious. That's what it was. Like, what system is there to break down? Like, Well, like if you can't see this, then what's left to explain? This person who basically is supposed to be the antithesis of basically everything that conservative parents are worried about right now becomes, the darling of the Republican Party in 20 minutes by parenting back one position that they hold, and then immediately drags the entire conservative punditry left at the speed of light. Forget swimming left. Cthulhu's got a jet ski at this point, right?
That's the title of your video. Cthulhu always jet skis left.
Yeah.
I think it sounds worthwhile, and like I completely see that it fits perfectly. I mean, I'd take a look at it if you want, but I think you should go ahead with a video. I mean, I know you've illustrated the Cthulhu metaphor in past videos, but when something as prime rears its head, I don't like, sometimes things just, I like to pair concepts to videos as well, and sometimes those things just kind of declare themselves.
Yeah, no, it's one of those things I always struggle with, because it's sometimes you feel like you're repeating yourself, but then I remember from journalism, like, we always joke with journalism, like you write the same story at least 20 times, because there's just this, there's always the next thing that's coming up that's, linked to the last thing you just talked about, and there's only a small change, but a lot of people haven't read it or aren't familiar or don't know how to apply it. So there is value in reiterating those positions in different ways. Like I said, I just I was just like, it might be better to make a stream out of it than an edited video.
As I think through it more, Auron, if you did make it, what would happen is I would wind up being impressed with it. I would take it and try to show it to my non-reactionary friends and family and say, surely this will pierce the veil. And they would all watch it and be like, you're a bigot, dude. And they would throw me back, into the closet and shun me. So maybe it is best for us both if
neither of us would have learned our lesson. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, guys, we're getting to the end of the stories we had. If anybody has any questions, you can go ahead and shoot them over. If you have anything for last things or for me, let me know. But while we're waiting for that last things, did you have any stories or any events the last few weeks? Anything that you've been thinking about that you wanted to talk about a little bit?
Oh, gosh. Well, one thing that I wanted to ask you, because I'm always curious, I ask other YouTubers this. What does your news feed look like? Like, do you have sites that you check every day, or like, are you using an RSS reader? Do you have? I guess I have websites that I look at every day because, to paraphrase Bronze Age Pervert, I need to pay attention to the shadows on the cave wall. Mm-hmm. So I'll scan the titles of the headlines of the New York Times and the Post, but then I have my own sources, which are often just people that I trust online, such as yourself. But what does your daily diet of news look like?
When I did constant news, I had just a ream of sources. Just like all the big publications, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post, all the big opinion makers, all the big aggregators, Drudge and such. And then a few like specialty. Okay, if I want to know about law, this is who I should look at, that kind of thing. Honestly, today, I don't do any of that stuff, man, because I feel like you said, like I want to know the shadows on the wall, and for me, that's what Twitter's for. Because Twitter breaks news faster than literally anything else. Like literally, like if I want to know something 3 hours before it hits any newspaper or headline, it's on Twitter. If you're following the right people, and so I just feel like that's a better investment in my time. Because it's also like you just mentioned, like Bronze Age Pervert has actually been like retweeting me constantly. So that's been a better avenue of my time to both absorb news and kind of gain a foothold. But you don't want it to just be Twitter, obviously, because then you're just getting a diet of like pre-fed outrage. porn.
Yeah.
So it is good to have some of those one of those. But honestly, that's one of the reasons I only do the news streams every couple weeks, because it's kind of a collection of things I want to talk about. I really want to focus more time on like other things. So I spend way more of my time. I used to spend infinite amount of time listening to news radio and that kind of thing when I'm driving, when I'm mowing the lawn, when I'm just doing whatever. Now I listen to audiobooks. I've been working my way through Democracy, the God That Failed. And I just got done with Managerial Revolution. Believe it or not, I hadn't read that one yet. And so I just find like that it's also better for like channel content, because I'm not just, cranking out stuff on the same, article that every single other guy who's doing, news streaming is doing all the time. It's nice to stop and do these kind of streams, but I feel like it's more useful if I can talk about things that aren't just like a constant stream of news.
Yeah. It's funny. It's a strange intuition, I have the opposite intuition of all of my kind of progressive friends that still just listen to NPR and the New York Times. And I've had this exact conversation where they've said to me like, well, who do you listen to? And I'm like, I've got like 5 or 6 people online, like that either have YouTube channels or, they're on Twitter, they have content, and they're like, you just trust like 6 individual people to give you the news instead of like the New York Times, that's crazy. And I'm always like, you would believe, like, you would rather read like the Washington Post that is owned by Jeff Bezos than trust a bunch of like independent people with Subscribestar accounts.
What makes
you to their boss?
What about the record of the media in the last 5 years makes you feel like any of those organizations are more reliable? Yeah.
It's just a tough nut to crack, but I think it's something that comes down to just sort of the baseline intuition. I remember trying to make this argument. I used Stefan Molyneux, which is probably not the right figure to grab, because he's, I respect him, but I can understand how, if you're coming at him for the first time, he's a pretty eccentric man. But I was trying to use him to talk to some friends of mine about the George Floyd event, because I thought he got shut down shortly thereafter, but he had 2 or 3 videos of like just going over the FBI database, talking to criminologists, doing this kind of detailed play-by-play. And I attempted to get a lot of people to look at that as opposed to the articles that they were getting in the New York Times and what have you. But there's just this sort of, I guess it's like 2 different animals. One that's like, but this is just a person with a microphone on the internet. How could they possibly be more uncanny than a powerful monolithic newspaper?
Easily, because they're actually able to do independent research. I mean, I think you're right that Molyneux does really good research on certain things. Unfortunately, he gives off this really powerful cult leader vibe.
It's because he looks like the dude from the Hale Bop comment.
Yeah, it's not just the look though; it's also the affectations. Like he definitely has some of that. That I know a prosperity gospel preacher when I see one.
He frames his head uncomfortably close.
Yes, he does.
Wow, like it's not the standard sort of like TV personality framing. There's always just a kind of claustrophobia to it.
But yeah, no, I think the other thing is like, when I was awash in the news, I think even though I was theoretically more informed, I thought less. If you're just in this constant deluge of trying to update your factual knowledge on every single news story, you never actually like develop thoughts on them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The funniest kind of jaw-dropping thing that I notice when it comes to this, this dichotomy about where people get their news. I don't know if you ever follow Justin Murphy. He's the guy that does Other Life, pretty big Twitter personality, kind of runs in our circles. But I mean, he was a political scientist, a PhD political scientist. He was in academia, and every time he's interviewed or he's interviewing somebody, and the subject of some sort of current event comes up, and he mentions that he's a political scientist, and then he's like, "Oh, I don't watch the news. I don't know anything about the news." And people are like, "But you were a political scientist," and he just says, "Yeah, well, like 6 months after something, I will read about it," which is kind of where we started the stream, Auron. I'll read out about something 6 months after the fact so that I can figure out what really happened. But otherwise, it's just noise. And I just thought that, I mean, like that coming from the mouth of a political scientist is, I guess, tells you what kind of a weird, hyper modern world we're all living in.
Yeah, I'm not under fire in case that came through my mic. Somebody's celebrating Memorial Day a little early. But yeah, no, I think he's right. Like, I think, I'm, as somebody who, I was a reporter, I worked on political campaigns, I have a political science degree. Like, I think you learn much more when you approach it that way. Like, I think that it's the intellectual version of day trading. You're just so in every moment of it that you never really have a chance to look at the bigger picture. So I've if anything, I've significantly dialed back my news intake over the last little bit. But I see Synagogue has wandered into the stream. Hello, man. If anybody has not seen him, I keep meaning to have Synagogue on for something or get together on something. We just haven't done it, but he has very interesting YouTube channel and Twitter.
Yeah, I second that. I love Synagogue's content. It's a great channel.
But he says, Auron, do you have any more details or insights on who more specifically is doing the institutional buying of all these homes, moving money out of the markets, Chinese buyers, anything? Well, I'll tell you this. I know for sure that Chinese buyers are extremely active overseas. I know that China has bought up large swaths of Australia. I know they're doing this with sections of Africa. And so many different Chinese businesses are doing exactly what you're talking about, buying. I don't know if in my area it is specifically Chinese. I think it's mostly American private equity, but I mean, at this point they could have Chinese backing, right? Like who knows? But I think it's a trend in general, and I think the Chinese are definitely on the bleeding edge of a lot of those, both I know globally and here, more domestically as well. But that said, I think that's most of our questions.
Awesome. We cut it right to around an hour.
Yeah, I do like to keep it at about an hour, and I know you are a family man as well, so we don't want to keep you too long. But thanks everybody for coming by. I really appreciate you coming by and watching. We had some great questions, great talks in the chat. Thanks again to Last Things for coming on. Make sure that you're checking out his channel. And as always, guys, we'll talk to you next time.
It was a pleasure, MacIntyre. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks.